Good morning. We are here today to do the Gazette Editorial Board interview with mayoral candidate and current El Paso County Commissioner, Amy Lathen. This is the second of the 4 interviews we will be doing, and the third one being later on today. With me today, in addition to candidate Amy Lathen, is editorial board members Pula Davis, Wayne Laugesen, and also observing today is reporter Monica Mendoza, although not part of the editorial board process. She's here to observe today and write about the process. So we're going to get started right away, if that's okay, Amy.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'll ask the first question to get started, and it's pretty much of an open-ended question we ask everybody. And the question is, why are you running? What kind of leader are you? And what best qualifies you to be mayor?
Sure, thanks. Why am I running? It's really, I think over all of these months and talking to people and talking about so many issues, it comes down to I really believe in what is possible for this city. I've lived here for 30 years. I'm raising my family here. I'm very, very involved in local government, have been for the 7 years, of course, that I've been on the county commission, and in things that I've worked in the community prior to that. And I just believe in something very exciting and very special at the city level that I think that I and a team of people can bring into the city. I want to bring in a different type of leadership. I want to bring a very regional approach to this city that we have not seen in years. And I want to bring the kind of leadership that empowers people to be amazing at their expertise. For example, I'm not a planner, I'm not an engineer. There are people who do those things. Those are real services that we deliver at the city. And I want them to bring ideas to the table that I haven't thought about and be amazing with those ideas. I want us to throw all those ideas in the middle of the table and go through them and see what works for this city. That requires leadership that believes in and empowers people to be great at what they do. And I get very excited about being able to bring a different kind of demeanor to this city. I know what amazing things we already have here, how great we already are. We have some hiccups to work through, obviously. We've got some things that are holding us back in some ways, and I want to go in and fix those. And so my style of leadership is very, very open. It's very well, I've used the word joyful, and I'll use it again. It goes to morale within this city. You need to have joy in leadership. You need to have someone who's articulate, who understands the services that we are delivering, and you need to be able to engender that in the people who deliver those services and work as a very cohesive unit. So I'm very excited about bringing that to the city.
So what are some of the first positive changes you would work toward if you were elected, in the first 4 years? What would you like to achieve?
Well, first of all, the first piece that we all talk about, I know everybody's kind of talking about the collaboration and the leadership, but it's very, very real. The first thing I'm going to do is move the mayor's office to City Hall. I believe in that because I believe the mayor should be working very closely with City Council. This is a new form of government. It's difficult to get used to. We've been working through this. There have been some issues there, as we all know, and those issues are hurting us economically. And so the mayor needs to be accessible and available to City Council to work through issues together so that we get past some of this acrimony, so that we can be functional together. Now, we obviously know the differences within the charter, the roles that are outlined there, but it does not mean, and I don't believe it ever meant, that there's a holy war between council and the mayor. We must work together on these things, and the mayor needs to be accessible to the council members. In the same way, the mayor needs to be accessible to staff. Needs to be there. I need to be able to go into staff members and say, it is okay to bring your ideas forward and to help me and this whole team of people figure out how to move this city forward and do things very, very differently. And so I'm very excited about that. That's just one of the first pieces of the relationship piece. When people say, how are you going to really collaborate? Well, I do it already. I have relationships with the city and with all of our other municipalities already. I'm very, very up to speed on all of our local issues that we have here and kind of where we need to move with that, and with the business community as well, the people who are here trying to move the needle on these issues. So the other, that's just kind of that leadership piece. The second piece of what I want to do has to do with service delivery. We're a service organization. This is the city. This is local government. We fill potholes, maybe not enough of them, but we fill them. We fix drainage. We build streets and bridges and roads. We deliver public safety. We deliver park services. That's an integral part of our community, and that people expect within their community. All of these service things that we deliver, we need someone who understands those service delivery pieces. And I want to go in and look at those in a different way. Again, I want to look at those from a regional perspective. If we can work on IT infrastructure, for example, information technology, which is critical in local government, look at the kinds of records that we are required to maintain and deliver through municipal courts, through the police department. Certainly at the county level, we have with the sheriff's office and the Department of Human Services and the district attorney. These are local level issues. If we can work together to deliver those services, why aren't we doing that? If we can work together and share resources throughout the entire region to deliver those services, to deliver park services, to work together on asphalt overlay, why aren't we? We should be. There should be no turf wars. So the service delivery, there are lots of pieces. I've got a whole bunch of information here that we'll talk about. Tons of information on my website. In my original platform, I've got a platform addendum with some very specific issues that I've told people I'm going to be rolling out that speak directly to that service delivery. And then, of course, it's advocacy for this city.
On regional cooperation and turf wars, which you just mentioned, one of the things you'll hear from Bach frequently is, well, I'm protecting the local taxpayers. We get fleeced by these other governments in the region, by the county, by nearby communities. We're subsidizing them. And he tries to stop that, which seems, to sort of counter the idea of this cooperation. How would you rectify those two interests that can be in conflict with one another?
Well, I suppose one would have to decide whether or not that statement is true, and I would argue that that is not an accurate statement. There's no one fleecing anyone. We are working together. Whether it's the county lockup, for example, the county jail. If you're arrested anywhere in El Paso County, you're going to the county jail. That's whether you're in Colorado Springs or Calhoun. Everybody goes to the county jail, and we work very closely together on that. We have a facilities maintenance agreement, an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Colorado Springs, where we do a vast majority of facilities maintenance. That's working together, and that's working brilliantly to save those resources. It's not a matter of taking resources out of the city, or the reverse, taking resources out of the county or Manitou Springs or any other municipality. It is a matter of working together to get the best value out of what we have to deliver. There are redundancies in what we deliver. If there is someone with a roller that we need to perform a particular repair, and we either have to contract it or we can go borrow it from another entity, how about we borrow that? How about we work out a way that we can share those resources and not have to spend more dollars either on contracting or obtaining that equipment? It comes down to basic common sense to me and how we work together, and it hasn't been done, and it needs to be given a chance. And that's a huge part of the way I approach this budget. And it's a model that works in many, many places. We don't have, legislatively of course, we are, what I serve in now as a county commissioner, we are a statutory county. Colorado Springs is a home rule municipality. Different forms of government, but still local governance, local level. And we have ways that we can work very, very closely together without a full integration of city-county government. We can do this and save money and create better efficiencies and deliver better service to the people of this community.
Amy, there's been a lot of talk about the current state of the economy in Colorado Springs. Certainly, it's factually correct to say that we've been lagging behind the rest of the state in many ways. And there are very detailed financial analysis of the city government that says that in the next decade, given the current trajectory of income revenues, and even on the heels of a pretty three and a half years of pretty strong fiscally responsible cost management by the city, that we still could be insolvent as a city. Two questions. One is, do you share that concern? And what do you think the solution to that is?
Well, of course you share the concern, because those kinds of things are possible. There are a lot of factors that play into that. When I came into the county in early 2008, the same things were being said. It was a little bit of a sinking ship for sure. We made significant changes to alter that course. It requires some very, very difficult decisions. Cutting spending. Now, everybody talks about cutting spending. That's a very, very easy soundbite. But this is local government, and we have pressures on our budget from the state and the feds that don't allow us to have discretion over all of the money that's collected, of course. So if we had say over every dollar that comes into the city, we'd be doing great, but we don't. We're told how to spend some of that money. And when it comes to the core infrastructure, that puts us in a difficult position. But that said, we have not looked at this from that regional perspective yet to be able to go in and eliminate some of those redundancies and be able to cut some of that spending, which we can do. Reduce some of the, change the systems. Put a system here that belongs over here and work together to deliver those things. You can save money by doing that. You have to increase the economy in a community. When we increase the economy in this community and we have more businesses coming in, we have more people employed, we will have more money in the general fund budget. And that's what my whole focus is on, how we as a city, where we have impact in this, how we change the economy of this city and generate more economic revenue so that we don't get to that point. But it goes to all of the pieces that we need to be looking at to work together. The service delivery, the economic development, the regulatory environment. And obviously, there are some people that would talk about we need to raise more revenue. Indeed, we talked about that with stormwater. We wanted to bring in more revenue for stormwater. Those issues still exist. We still have to have that conversation. I'm not ready to say it's time for more revenue in the general fund because I haven't had an opportunity to go in and change the systems yet.
A question we've been asking everyone also is, I'm going to go back to something you brought up, which was how council and the mayor's office works together. One specific question that both readers wanted us to ask, and it's also something that's being talked about a lot right now, is the charter. A, do you think that the charter needs work? And B, how would you go about doing that?
Sure. Well, I don't go about doing it. It would be the people, of course. A charter change goes out to a vote of the people, but we would come out and say, we think this needs to be done, and push forward with that. I have said very, very openly, I'm not supportive of any charter changes right now, because there's going to be a new administration, and that new administration, whoever that is, needs time to work with the council and really work through some of these issues. Okay, here's what was facing us before. We were really struggling here. Here's what we can do together and work some of that through internally. I don't want to continue to change the charter because it does make for more uncertainty in the business community. The more you change it, the more you need certainty. The business community expects city government to be stable. They expect city government to be reliable. Frankly, they expect city government to be kind of invisible. We need to be below the radar. So I don't support charter changes right now. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't support them if we find this is the best way to do this. There's been a lot of discussion about should City Council have their own attorney? Well, I can tell you, City Council needs their own advice from legal counsel that is not mired in policy. Legal advice needs to be given absent policy. It needs to be strictly given based on the legal issues at hand. And when it gets dictated to by policy, by one party or another, it really muddies the way that they are able to use this. So City Council needs access to true legal representation. That doesn't necessarily mean they hire their own attorney, because now we have an attorney for this branch, an attorney for this branch, and we've just created probably another battle. I'd like to try it a different way. They need that access. That comes from leadership, it comes from the philosophy, and it comes from making sure that that legal counsel is pure. They also need access to staff. They need to be able to go in and ask the professional staff questions about what's on their agenda before they get to the dais, and be able to work through issues. Hey, I don't understand why this land use item looks like this. Why is this, how does this play into this ordinance? I need to get these answers. They need to be able to go and ask any member of city staff whenever they want to, I have a question. I have a question for you. They're not getting that right now. They're not able to access city staff. That needs to change. But I think that can be done with the way we lead together. If it can't, then we'll look at a charter change. But I'm not willing to do a charter change right now for any of these things. It's time for somebody to get in there and kind of see what we can fix together, because I really believe that we can. So no charter changes for me at this point.
I'll keep going, but my colleagues are going to be jumping in here in a second, I'm sure. Colorado Springs Utilities, the governance structure, do you think that's something that needs to be changed?
I actually really believe that we've got to get this conversation going. It already has been. It's just, we've had studies, we've tried to get the conversation. It's time to have a big, open, public discussion about this. I think the governance of utilities needs to have some changes. I'd like to see some experts on the board, experts within the industry. That is not to say anything derogatory or negative about any member of City Council. It is to say that this is obviously an extraordinary enterprise in this city, and we have got to be looking at it with some professional lenses. I would not want the governance, I view it as a bit of a hybrid model. I would not want the governance to be a majority of appointed members, because I think that gets us into another quagmire. I think that could cause other problems. So if it does change, I think it's still the people of this community expect accountability. They expect representation. They get that through elected officials. They should be getting that through elected officials. And so I think a hybrid model is probably a good idea, but this needs to be vetted in a very broad public discussion, and it's time. No more delaying. Let's get this out there. Let's get discussing and move on down the road with governance.
You've talked about a lot of plans that you have for the city. Do you have any plans for our blighted areas? We all know that the southeast part of Colorado Springs has pretty much for the last 10, 15 years gone into a downward spiral. And also, what are your thoughts on infilling and growth?
Okay, so I am a huge supporter of Blight to Bright. You can go to a website, it's called blighttobright.org. And I've got this in my platform. This is a wonderful way to look at blight in a different perspective and really empower either the owners or investors to be able to get in there and clean up areas of our city. So Blight to Bright is an extraordinary approach to allowing for cleanup, allowing for rejuvenation. And I'm a huge supporter, and I want to get that implemented. I believe in revitalization in communities through citizens. We have had citizens come forward and say, we'd like to take care of that median. We will paint, we will clean, we will weed, we will do all of that. And they have actually been told no in many cases. We can't ask for more money and say we don't have enough money and talk about these kinds of things if we're not willing to allow citizens to be a part of this. Colorado, we have CDBG grants, community development block grants, that are actually very ripe with, of all things, money for paint in communities. It sounds like a simple thing, but just freshening that up in blighted areas and allowing people access to that, bringing in some of those dollars. This is something that can be done at regional building, where you bring in those kinds of simple resources to revitalize an area. You can bring in, people can do this in community groups. I want to work through CONO, all the neighborhood organizations, to work on our blighted areas, and they can go and get free resources from the Household Hazardous Waste Facility, just as an example. Those are small things. Bigger things, if we are fining properties that are blighted, constantly levying fines on them, they become encumbered with a great amount of debt and fines. And investors come in to look at these. They want to pick them up, they want to scrape them, they want to rebuild, but they're saddled with this debt. That's something that the city has to be very serious about changing. Being able to put this policy in place that may forgive those kinds of things so that they can be revitalized. I believe in a program where we can either set areas of the city, or we can say anywhere within the city, if you come into a blighted area and you invest 50% or more of the value of that property, then we are going to freeze your taxes for 5-7 years. That's an incentive for you to be able to come in and do that rehabilitation in that area. That's very real. That's part of what I want to implement so that we can start rebuilding some of these areas. That speaks directly to infill and what we're able to do there. Just the concept of, as simple as in regional building, for example, getting a permit to move a wall. So this is where we're rebuilding. So obviously very easy to build on fresh land, very different to rebuild. When you go into regional building and it's a fortune to get a permit to move a wall, or you have to have 5 different agencies review that plan before you can do it, or you have to get more than one permit, it becomes very difficult. I'm looking at this very specifically from the permitting stage, from the regional building perspective, to simplify this so that people can come in and make changes in this city quickly, rather inexpensively, and really change the dynamic. When there is a blighted property, it's not just that property. The value around the property diminishes. Then we take in fewer taxes because the value is less. Then that property that's blighted tends to attract problems, for lack of a better way of putting it. And we can track, you can go into Blight to Bright, you can track how many police calls have gone to that particular property throughout this city. And then you can put a value on how much it costs for the police to respond to that property. Look at what that's costing this city. We have got to get serious about the blighted areas of this city, and that's what I've outlined in this, very specifically.
One follow-up question, Amy, is that you touched on, you've mentioned the word planning, and it's come up several times. It came up in our meetings with readers of the Gazette in terms of what they wanted to know, and having a city plan of some sort of where we're going, what's important, has come up several times. Within that, this notion of infill, you mentioned infill. How much of a priority within a city planning process, yet to be determined, do you think infill is?
Well, it's a huge priority in terms of the city plan, because city is more urbanized, obviously, than looking at the entire region. So you have areas that are blighted. And remember, any kind of an area that maybe it's not even blighted, maybe it's just it hasn't been developed. And you want to develop in that area. Again, any of those factors may turn into a little cancer, and that cancer spreads throughout the region. And the economic fallout of that is very, very poor. Incentives, sometimes some folks think that that's a dirty word, but look, we have to be competitive. And the business environment in this country, when we talk about attracting employers and creating jobs, which of course we don't do, the capitalists create the jobs. We just have to give them the environment to do it. When we're talking about that, we have to be really serious about how we're getting in their way. And we, in the great economy of the country and all the competitiveness, I view it as a cash auction. I've been around the table with these companies. I've sat there and pushed across the table, here's what the county can do for you. I've got a council member here, here's what the city can do for you. Here's what we can put together in a package. Would you come to our community? Inevitably, the question is, how much cash are you putting on the table? They want to know, how much cash is in this deal for me? This is competition between cities. We don't have a big bucket of cash to put on the table as we try to compete for these, even as we try to expand existing companies. How then do we compete? We have to be smart. We have to look at other ways to compete, and we do that in the regulatory environment from the city's perspective. Extraordinary ways that we can compete, and I can tell you that when we're sitting at the table and we say, here's what we can do and here's what we can do, and we don't have the money, we can't compete with that city down south that you're looking at as well. I know what they've offered you. But let me tell you, we can get you permitted and up and running inside of 6 weeks, where they want 4 years, literally. That is huge value to business, huge value to business. And that is where the rubber meets the road with what the city delivers. That's where we can really make an impact. Now, there are a lot of these, all of this goes hand in hand. It goes hand in hand with workforce. It goes hand in hand with being able to incent infill. And being able, when you incent infill and you have that kind of vibrancy downtown, you attract the young workforce that everyone's talking about, that they want a certain quality of life. They want that urban quality of life. it all fits together. And so you've got to have, everybody's kind of calling it an ecosystem these days, but it is. It's an ecosystem that has to fit together. Infill is about, in some ways, it's about incentive, and it's about eliminating some of the regulatory burdens that exist with it, and they're significant.
Part of that ecosystem, I think, is image. And one of the things, we have obvious examples in Colorado of communities that really don't pay for anything, but people are knocking their doors down to bring businesses and start businesses there because they're cool. They are attractive ecosystems. Our community has an image problem nationally and internationally for a number of reasons. A lot of people say it has to do with the religious right. We've actually been called racist recently in a hatchet job in the International Business Times. I'd like to know if you have any ideas on what we can do about that image and how much of that image is actually accurate.
Well, this is where it gets pretty tough, right? Because, and I was in a meeting and somebody said, we want the city to be cool, make it cool. Well, I can't define for you what's cool, because what's cool to me may not be to you. We've kind of joked about it a little bit. I like country music, and I guarantee you there are a lot of people who probably don't, but so they would say I'm a geek and it's not cool. So it's not about any politician, so to speak, defining what's cool. It's about a community with diversity. We all know that. We have a diverse community. And when we talk about that, when it comes back home to roost with the with policies and things like that, you can talk about what's cool, you can talk about the religious right, but the religious right, they are people that we represent as well. And so in as much as people will say, well, we just can't stand that religious right, they are a part of this community. They are a vital part of this community, as are those who view things in a very different way. You cannot go out and make everybody happy, and something that is very important to me, and I stress to people all the time, is representation is not synonymous with agreement. If I disagree with someone, it doesn't mean I'm not representing them, because it is impossible to agree with everyone. It is impossible to go out and define for this city what's cool. We have longhorns that go down Tejon in the summertime, and I think that's really cool. And that's that Western heritage, and some people think that is as backward as you can get. But that's what Colorado Springs was built on, and it's part of our heritage, it's part of our history, and I think it's important to embrace that. But then it's also important to embrace the kind of the new, all of the arts culture. I'm a huge fan of all of the things we're doing in the arts in this community. And some of the things that aren't as branded for Colorado Springs, but are here. We need to be shouting that out to everyone. Hey, did you know that Colorado Springs hosted an opera here last summer? You guys, you can't imagine what kind of a reception that got, and the kind of discussion that's going on in New York City about Colorado Springs, Colorado, and how vibrant we are, and how eclectic we are, and how much diversity there is here. There's far more of the good discussion going on, I think, than people realize. I hear it. I just want to create the environment where all of this can flourish, and at the end of the day, I believe that it's the free market that defines what's cool. And that's what's going to tell us what it is. So,
over the weekend, there was a story in the New York Times. Maybe it was Friday. But the point of the story was there are a few cities that are doing very well. And it's not it's not New York, it's not San Francisco, it's not the old ones, at attracting millennials, young professionals that everyone needs to sustain the economy. And the three factors that the story named for attracting were entertainment, culture, and pot. And obviously this is a community that has chosen not to go down that road with the recreational pot scene you see in Denver. What are your thoughts on that issue and how we should handle it going forward?
Sure. That's a tough one, because obviously we've got a real split in this community about that. And in as much as we hear the cool factor about the pot, we also know that we have students flocking into universities in Colorado so that they can smoke pot. Now, is that the right thing then for the workforce when the aerospace industry comes in and says we need this workforce, but we're very concerned because we think that there's too much influence in the marijuana, with the marijuana in the workforce? What are we gonna fall on? Here's what we've got. We've got recreational pot that is legal. You can possess and use up to an ounce. We have, within the question, that asked about whether or not we should legalize this, there was a provision that said local entities may opt out of the operations that essentially support marijuana industry. County opted out, the city opted out, and there are a lot of factors involved. It's not just as simple as come out and smoke pot or let's get a whole bunch of tax revenue for pot, because there are always impacts. We know that we see increased usage in the youth. So we talk about a young workforce. We talk about a vibrant, articulate, and empowered and educated young workforce. And yet we see younger people using more marijuana. This is a conflict, and the business community knows it. I have been very, very open about it. I voted to opt out of these operations in the county. The city did as well, and I think Steve Bach did the right thing in that.
Stormwater. So you've been very, very involved with the stormwater issues, taking a regional approach, as you had said earlier. What would be what would you support? Again, some of these questions that come up from the readers and some of the questions we're asking you, we realize that the mayor doesn't have the authority to wave a magic wand and decide some of these stuff, so you have to work collaboratively and so forth. But what would you support in terms of looking forward and figuring out a solution for stormwater?
All that science and engineering that the task force put into this latest stormwater proposal is still there. So when the task force set out to look at, the first phase was, what's the real problem? Don't go tell all the people that the sky is falling, scare tactics, give us more money. That's not acceptable. What's the science? We engaged engineering, professional engineering firms to identify what the true problem is. The capital, the maintenance, where are the projects around the city, vetted them, are they truly related to drainage and stormwater? That information got lumped into the middle of the table. We then in phase 2 went out and said, now what are the resources that we have to deal with those problems regionally? The military, educational institutions, federal government, in some different ways with the Forest Service, et cetera. What kind of resources do we really have out there to address this? That was phase 2. Okay, now we know here's the problem based on science. Here are the resources available, and of course there was a gap. All that information is still true. It hasn't changed. The capital projects still remain. The operations and maintenance are still there. We know what the problems are, and we still know that we do have a gap in the funding. But the people said, no, you didn't get it right. And it could have been, I've heard a number of different things. We had so many town hall meetings. We had so many open forums on this. And I think probably there was certainly some concern about the 20 years, that it went for too long. That people want to have accountability. Again, goes back to that accountability. Can you prove to me that you're being straightforward with the money that you're spending? And so that issue comes up. A little bit of, do we really want to let the operations and maintenance go on forever? Or should we expire that as well and ask the people if we're doing all right? A lot of different issues that came up, the governance came up. I want to go forward and continue the conversation about that. Hey folks, 47% of you said this was okay. What did you like? What didn't you like? Do you want us to go forward? And if so, what would you change? And we're already starting to have that conversation. Well, in fact, we started that before the end of the year. That needs to continue. Obviously, there are some new ways at the city that they've talked about to repurpose the skip bonds, to let them expire, dedicate that money to stormwater. Those are all great ways, but at the end of the day, they still never filled those gaps that we have in stormwater. And this is core infrastructure. This isn't a very volatile social problem that people discuss. You shouldn't be spending money on that. At the end of the day, we have a responsibility to maintain our infrastructure. We have responsibilities to the federal government that they require us to do. We have responsibilities to our neighbors to our south. They know that, we know that. And so I want to continue the conversation and say to the public very openly, what would you like us to do? What would you like us to change? And may we come back and maybe we ask again, but only after we learn more about what the people want, if that makes sense. So I believe in the original stormwater proposal because it was based on science, it was based on being regional, and it was based on being accountable.
What about transportation? We hear from our readers all the time, letters to the editor and calls about the fact that basically our transportation system is outdated. You can't get there from here, or vice versa. Yeah, it's a big comment from the public about how outdated and unfriendly it is if you have to rely on public transportation.
It is very tough in this community, and I've been on PPRTA for several years. I was the chair last year, and we worked very hard with the city, and obviously there's been a big discussion about the aspirational goals of the maintenance of effort for transit that are related to PPRTA specifically. And I think we need to keep that promise with the people. So we've got to go out and reprioritize and figure out how we keep that promise. Transit is dependent on our infrastructure, just like our personal cars are dependent on the infrastructure. So we've got to work on this together. We've got to work on how we get more choice riders. This is a little bit of that chicken and the egg. How do you put more money into a system for riders that you're not attracting? And how do you put more money into the system to attract more riders, right? It's a little chicken and the egg, so we're working on that very closely. There are a lot of different ways that perhaps we could work on a regional transit model. We could look at a transit district. We can look at different ideas that we have in sharing some of those resources. I've met with the Transit Coalition and talked to them. I think I'll be meeting with them again here soon to talk about some of their ideas. We look at the transfer times. Has a huge impact on people who rely on this system to get to their jobs and get back home to their families from their jobs. And we don't do them any favors in the transfer times. We've increased some of that. We've done some improvements. End of the day, it does come down to money. We kind of joked a little bit earlier this morning. I suppose any one of us could solve any problem in the world with big old buckets of money, but that's not the way this works. We've got to be very intentional about, in my opinion, first about the budget so that we can meet that aspirational, that goal, which is not aspirational to me. It's a promise. And provide that kind of service. And we've got to work on attracting more choice riders so that we have more capacity to add more routes.
Much as we loathe to in any way embroil a mayoral candidate in a social issue, you're going to get this question on the campaign trail if you haven't already. Other mayors have dealt with it. What's your position on the signing of a Pride Fest proclamation?
Sure. I have gotten the question, so Thank you. This is obviously a divisive issue, and it goes to the representation issue. If you represent me, you have to agree with me. Anybody who signs or who doesn't sign is going to make this group of people upset, this group of people happy. It's a very divisive issue, and it's not something that I would sign.
I would like to ask a question about military. This has come up in our meetings with readers. As mayor, what would you do to strengthen our position, both from a relationship with the military standpoint and the larger question of how do we maintain our employment base here in Colorado Springs?
Well, we meet with military representatives all the time, and it's a great opportunity to constantly be working with them. We work with them at the state level, local level. We meet with them in Washington when we go out there, and it's about what are we doing to support your mission? What can we do more to support your mission? And in some cases, we have a snow plowing agreement, things that folks may not think about, but we provide certain services to them that really improve their operations and help them focus more on their mission, and that gets relayed back to brass in Washington, and that is a factor when they make decisions about the kinds of force that they have in a community. So simple things like infrastructure support, land use support is a huge piece. If they have a mission that requires them to expand in whatever way they need to expand, what are we doing? How are we at the table to make sure that they're able to complete that mission? And that's where we've got that kind of authority, whether in the city or the county or other municipalities that are surrounding. Constant communication. They're in support with the core infrastructure and with their mission, which the way it hits home for local government is the planning. And we just continue to do that in every way we possibly can, here and outside of the city.
Airport.
Yes.
How important is it, do you think, to the region? And do you think there's a lot more we can do? Because some people say, geez, there's nothing you can do. But where do you stand on your outlook and what your administration would do to try to support the local airport?
It's a huge issue to this community. And it's not just about, I go online to find my ticket for my vacation and it's more expensive than Denver. It's so much more than that. Certainly, we want the ticket prices to be lowered, but we want the direct flights, and we want to be able to attract business to our community because they have access to our community. That's a factor. If we're trying to pull in a primary employer or expand business that's here, and they know that their workforce, the people that they engage with, certainly in the military, in some ways, with contracting, if they can't get their people here easily, they may end up going up to Denver and putting a crane in the air up there. We want the cranes down here. So airport is huge. The airport operates the entire airport property. Kind of think of a rectangle. The whole airport property, you got the terminal business unit right in the center. And as long as the vast majority of revenue to operate the entire airport property is coming from that terminal business unit, then you're going to have problems with attracting aircraft because you're charging them more. It's the cost per employment. Every person, to get that person from the curb to the seat in the aircraft. It's about lowering that cost. So the way that gets done is you obtain revenue, you get your revenue from other business units in the airport, on the airport property. Here's an example of what we just did at RTA just in December. I was chair of RTA, and in November brought onto our agenda this question in our public session of whether or not we should exempt the PPRTA sales tax in those business units on the airport. Had a discussion, public hearing, then went to the December hearing and passed that unanimously to exempt those business units from the PPRTA sales tax. So here we are, it's early February. Over a week ago, I just met with a business person here locally who is bringing new business into that area, and he said, Amy, I did it specifically because that tax was exempted. Now I'm bringing in my hangar, I'm bringing in this number of employees, and I'm going to bring in this second business, very exciting business, and very, very good jobs, because that was that little incentive. There's that piece of competition. Otherwise, he would have been in Centennial. So we did this. They're bringing in even more. That's just one example that I just met with. He brought those jobs and that business and all that revenue into this community because we exempted that 1 cent sales tax. That then means that he's leasing that property and generating revenue for the airport, taking more pressure off that terminal. All of that in aggregate, as you continue to develop that, will take more and more pressure off, and all of a sudden it's less expensive to park an airplane at the terminal. And then you combine that with direct advertising into cities, and Dan Gallagher is great at what he's doing, just tremendous. And he has shown us where direct advertising into cities for flights directly into Colorado Springs it spikes the number of people wanting to travel that way. A little bit of marketing, a little bit of advertising. He's going to move the needle, and those are the kinds of things that do.
I think you've been a pretty outspoken proponent of City for Champions in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about your position, what you'd like the public to know about it, and specifically as it regards the stadium downtown? How should that be handled as far as a vote of the public and funding and all of that?
Well, I'll get right to it. I absolutely will not support local participation without a vote of the people. We have to have a vote on this. Now, the big picture for City for Champions is tax increment financing. And this was based on legislation that Denver now has, where if anyone proves that a new project is unique and extraordinary, those are the two standards. If you can prove they're unique and extraordinary, meaning they will bring new people into the state who pull out their wallets and spend money, then we'll rebate back some of your sales tax. That's what this amounts to. So Denver looked at this entire project, said, we agree, the State Economic Development Commission, we agree that this is unique and extraordinary. New people will come if you do this, meaning they'll spend money, new economy, not new taxes, new economy, and we'll rebate back money we already are taking from you anyway. That's great. I think that's fantastic. That's getting our money back and investing in our community. The question is whether or not the city and the county should engage the same formula of tax increment financing from our individual sales tax into that downtown sports and events complex. And there are too many questions outstanding at this point that we still need to get answers to. That is, are the numbers really viable? We have this third-party analysis that's coming out hopefully very, very soon that will really look to that pro forma. Does this really draw the new people in? Does this really show the kind of new economic activity that they say it will? When we just internally ran the numbers, we took a very conservative approach and cut them in half. And at build-out, even when we cut the numbers in half, the county would look at about $3.8 million more annually in our revenue just by the new economic activity that's generated from these. But we need to know if those numbers are accurate. And then, if they are, and there is a request for us to do a TIF, it has to go to a vote. That's what the people demand, and that's what we will do.
Very good. Okay. I think that covers our list of questions, Amy, so we appreciate your time today and your candor with both us and the people watching. And good luck, and thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure.